Health inspectors of Reddit. What are the most vile conditions you've ever seen in a restaurant? Former health inspector here, and current third-party food safety auditor. A few things that come to mind. 1. Grocery store so infested with rodents that an entire group of them was living in the dairy cooler. You know there had to be a lot of them in the store if some were resorting to living in a cold room. 2. Chinese restaurant getting ready to open for lunch. I walked in and tempered the items in the walk-in cooler. All were well above acceptable temperatures. Cooler had broken down in the night and was no longer functioning. They wanted to serve the food anyway. I had to embargo the entire cooler worth of food and stood there as they filled trash bag after trash bag with meat and took it to the dumpster. As I was leaving the location, I drove around to the back and they had employees pulling it all out of the trash and dragging it back into the building. Had to stop them, make them return it to the dumpster and pour straight bleach all over the food to ensure it could not be used. 3. Restaurant so infested with cockroaches that when the manager greeted me at the host stand to take me to the kitchen, he had a roach crawl across his back right in front of me. 4. Observed people smoking in the kitchens and in meat departments of grocery stores. Also observed folks using chewing tobacco and keeping their spit cups on the food prep surfaces. Most of the stuff we think is disgusting isn't necessarily what the general public would even notice. A lot revolves around hand washing. If you really watch someone during food production and see all the things they touch and then attempt to handle ready to eat foods, it's disgusting. People just don't even think about hand washing like they should. I know I have a bunch more. I'll update as I think of it all. Had to stop them, make them return it to the dumpster and pour straight bleach all over the food to ensure it could not be used. My money's on them just hosing the food down and serving it as normal. My friend in school talked about how trash the place he works at is. He said stuff like if someone drops a slice of pizza, they'll pick it up and serve it to the next guy. They'll do this with all their food. The restaurant part is fancy, but the kitchen is a mess and nobody really cleans it. How they are still in business? Well, when the first health inspector comes, they'll fail and they have a certain amount of time to correct it. Then the supervisor of the inspectors comes, who is good friends with the restaurant owner. He passes the restaurant either way. Some restaurant near me got shut down because they had freshly severed goat heads in the refrigerator. They didn't serve goat. Hail Satan. I worked at a McDonald's that was just about to get rebuilt and had just narrowly passed inspection. What does this mean? The owner doesn't want to replace anything because the store is about to get torn down, so the whole place went to crap. A drunk person flushed a pair of underwear in the bathroom and clogged the sewage once, causing sewage to come up through the drains in the kitchen and stock rooms. We still served food. Then the stock room where we keep a lot of food items had a ceiling cave-in and fiberglass insulation was dangling less than a foot away from food products on shelves. We were regularly pulling trash cans from the lobby and kitchen anytime it rained to help contain rainwater from leaks in the ceiling back in the stock room. I left last November. The store doesn't get torn down for another month, so I can only imagine how crappy it is now. I didn't know Silent Hill had a McDonald's. Not the worst, but never ate there after this. First week in Canada I went into Popeyes as who doesn't like mashed potatoes. They were cleaning when I walked in and there was a guy with a pressurized hose blasting the floor and the water was spraying everywhere. The fine mist of grim floor water could be seen coating the food waiting in the pass, the prep tables. Everywhere in that tiny space was just getting blasted with floor goop. I never worked at a Popeyes, but I certainly worked at other fast food and non-chain restaurants and we always scrubbed the floor with a brush then squeegeed it up. If for some reason the floor was so bad it needed a pressure washer, not only was it not cleaned regularly, but no food or customers should be anywhere in the area. Was a tradesman working on a hotel in Lower Buttfuck, a fine city in Alberta. The reason I was working on it was because a new owner was renovating, updating the hotel. Their restaurant had a salad bar. Every single member of the kitchen staff got fired when the new owner discovered that the salad bar hadn't been cleaned, sterilized in months. They just kept adding more food on top of the old stuff. WH at the frick. Not inspector but cook. One very popular local restaurant has the worst roach infestation ever. If you picked up the ticket printer and tapped it on the table you would have 40-60 baby roaches scatter. Roaches everywhere you look. They would fall from the ceiling or crawl onto the plate of food before the server could take it out. It was the most disgusting place. I quit and it's still super popular and still buggy. Not a health inspector, but when I worked at Subway we caught a co-worker doing something inappropriate. My manager had to look at the camera for some unrelated reason. He is skipping forward and accidentally goes too far forward. He notices a worker putting a bin of tuna on the floor. He keeps looking at the tape. The worker pulls his pants down and proceeds to enter the bin of tuna. He makes sweet love to the tuna, finishes up, goes into the bathroom to clean off, proceeds to smooth out the bin of tuna, wraps it back up and puts it in the fridge. My manager immediately has me throw out the tuna and make more. Needless to say, he was fired. And while this was 20 years ago, I still can't eat tuna I didn't make or see made. TLDR. Co-worker fricked a bin of tuna and put it back in the fridge. Well, I think this one might be the winner. One of the news channels where I live does a weekly segment called Restaurant Report Card. It shows the good and bad DHEC reports of the week. There was one Chinese restaurant that had live chickens in the kitchen. Fresh. My mom used to be a health inspector. A bar had a bear chained outside and the owners would bring it inside to hang out with the patrons sometimes. That's the most Russian thing I have ever heard. Walked into a Mexican restaurant one time and saw some lady soaking some tripe in a mop sink. Saw that and told them to throw all of it in the dumpster and bleach it in front of me. My boss had seen a restaurant defrosting raw shrimp in a mop sink with the mop draped over the faucet. My other co-worker had to work a foul odor complaint where this Chinese buffet was closed for about a week without utilities. He walked in and found the food was still in the buffet line. He said the stench was so rotten that he immediately threw up upon opening the door. The food was stewing in its juices for a week in the Texas summer heat. Those are the worst ones that I can think of. ATM. Not a health inspector, but I worked at an ice cream shop when I was 15. My boss found a mini fridge in an abandoned closed down elderly home. There was still food in there, with cottage cheese that expired 3 years prior to me opening it. She gave me 2 bottles of bleach and said go to town. Now I pleaded with her not to keep the fridge, not because I had to do the Charlie work on it, but because it was freaking nasty. Even if we did get rid of the mold that was literally eating the interior of the fridge, I didn't feel right putting food in there and selling that food to customers. Cleaned it anyway and put it out on the floor, but refused to put stuff in there. When people put stuff in it, I'd throw it away or move it, depending on what it was. I also had to negotiate with my boss on how often she let me clean the frillator grease. I wanted to do it once a day but ended up only getting a once a week approval, which was better than once a season like she had been. You're a good person. Just wanted you to know. Not an inspector, but witnessed something gross. I worked for a company that had a lunchroom with an older woman who cooked our breakfast and lunch. I think she was friends of the owners. She would bring in a daily special, like chili, but also made sandwiches and whatnot. We had out of town customers, and when lunchtime came around, the secretaries would set up lunch in a conference room by the lunchroom, and the lady would make something special just for them. So I'm taking away plates after these people had eaten and bringing them to the lunchroom for lunch lady to load dishwasher. Now, not everyone had finished their meals. It was chicken and rice this day. It was rather late and an employee had come in asking her to make him something. I'm going back and forth doing my thing and I see her scrape the leftover food back into the pot from several plates. I couldn't believe my eyes, so I just stare with question marks floating over my head. Then I hear her ask the guy, who was reading something, so not looking at her, if he wants chicken and rice. He says sure, and she makes him a plate of leftover food she scrapes off the plates I gave her. I should have said something, but I noped out of there real quick. It bothered the heck out of me, so I confessed to a co-worker, and she's all you have to tell the boss. I did. It escalated to the owners, and lunch lady was fired. We have similar lunch lady at our work. She is not so open, but I've seen her pull hair out of food and serve it to colleagues. I have seen her wipe the surface and use same cloth to hold the plates and clean them. Everyone knows she is not so hygienic, but everyone eats her food. I don't even want her touching the lunch I brought from home. To make you feel better, I used to work at Costco and the place was really clean. The ice cream machine was dismantled and cleaned at least every week. It took 2 hours each time. The fryer emptied and cleaned every day. In the food court, we would spend hours on cleaning alone. The meat department was hosed down with disinfectant and scrubbed every day. Someone was hired just to clean the bakery department during the evening. The health inspector was seen shopping there a couple of times, which I think was good news. I may not have a great experience working there, but I know it's clean. My mother briefly became the head of the health inspection for our county. I recall two good stories. First, she noted that even though there were many violations, there seemed to be no punishment from the department for restaurants that forced them to fix these things, except for new restaurants. She asked why. Their response was that these restaurant owners are our friends. If we punish them or fine them, or send out a violation notice, they might not like us anymore. She tried to fix that, but story 3 below got in the way. Second, and this is just awesome, so I am sharing it. A house, not a restaurant, had a sewage problem. It was backing up and the neighbors finally got the county to investigate. They decided that the septic tank and field were backed up, so they forced the homeowner to dig it up and reinstall a new one. A few $1,000s even back in the day. When they finally got it exposed, they discovered the homeowner has backed a short school bus into a trench 10 or 20 years before and has the sewage going into a window in the front behind the driver's seat, and had cracked open the back door to allow it to drain. It was full. Third, there was a dude, old dude, who was close to retirement. He was a crap stain. He was verbally and sexually abusive to the staff. The inspector's not my mother, who is well, matronly. What she did do is fire his butt, but the county board rehired him since he was close to retirement after he abused, attacked some of the women in the office. She fired him again. This is like month 2 of the job. And then 5 people on the county board and her all had flat tires the same day, and they discovered that each of them had a box of nails emptied at the bottom of their driveway. So the county board rehired the bastard. She quit. Not a health inspector, but I deliver beer, so I see the backs of many restaurants on a day-to-day basis as we're dropping product in their storage areas. The worst was a buffet that had an inescapable smell of hot rotten milk. Not sure how I even know what that smells like, but it was like they had been microwaving rotten milk for an hour and left it somewhere. I had to leave the delivery. My co-worker was sick with a stuffy nose and did the delivery for me as I gagged outside. Talked to a couple co-workers later that week and they agreed that place always has a weird smell. I knew a guy in college that used to deliver beer and he said he delivered to a restaurant once that had dirt floors in the kitchen. Health inspector here. 1. Just shut down a place due to a severe cockroach infestation. 2. Shut down a restaurant a while back as there was a severe rodent infestation. I'm talking poop everywhere, in the utensil bins, on the food prep surfaces, just everywhere. Owners were brushing it aside as they worked. Live mice stuck to glue traps under sinks, etc. 3. Another rodent infestation. Owner just left cardboard boxes of open poison throughout the restaurant. Although we can order a place closed, it doesn't happen that often. We try to educate first and work with operators. Having said that, sometimes a ticket or closure order is the only thing that will work. Most places I inspect are pretty decent. A lot of what we see is lack of safe food handling procedures and hand washing. That is, preparing raw chicken with gloves on, placing gloved hands right into the flour, tossing the chicken, touching sink taps, cooler doors, etc., with no hand washing. Also, cultural backgrounds and the way food was prepared back home does not meet standards in Canada. For your information, we also inspect personal services, nail salons, tattoo shops, etc., drinking water system, private septic systems and pools. Not a health inspector, but worked at a restaurant that was barely skirting by on health inspections. We had a big roach problem, but we did a good job keeping them out of the actual food, which I guess is the big thing they look for with health inspections. The most egregious issue, though, was the time I was making milkshakes and accidentally cut my arm on the metal counter. Well, I didn't notice how bad the cut was until I saw blood in the ice cream tub. Being a responsible person, I go to throw the ice cream out when the manager interrupts me, saying I should go use the first aid kit and they'll take care of the ice cream. Well, I come back to the same tub of ice cream returned to the freezer, but the blood scraped out of it. They kept using the ice cream. I was in the training program to be a state health inspector after I graduated from college. The majority of the inspections weren't memorable and small stuff got written up, like temps being too low or high, not having gloves accessible, storing meat boxes on the ground, etc. The TWP inspections that I remember being horrible were both at low-end Chinese places in strip malls. In one inspection, the wok chef had an overflowing ashtray right next to the meat bins, rodent droppings, piles of dead flies behind the range, open doors to the outside. Just nasty. We also had to check soda machines and the hoses and guns. The soda gun line at one place was so caked with mold and funk it was a miracle that soda could even get through. We couldn't figure out how any previous inspector had missed it or WTF happened. The soda gun was the worst because it ruined eating out and having a mixed drink. I'll never be able to drink anything out of a soda gun ever again. I got a better job offer after 2 months of that and ran out of that job. Former employee of a few food drink related places. Rat roach droppings in the pizza boxes. Fry cook dropping things and picking them back up to fry. He reasoned that the oil was hot enough to burn off anything. The oil was changed only weekly if not bi-weekly sometimes. Ice cream shop where no hairnet or gloves were offered needed, so manager's hair ended up in ice cream. Also, questionably clean hand making cones. Slime mold colonies. Not growth. Freaking civilizations. In the ice makers and soda spouts at a whole chain of gas stations. As far as I know, I was the only one who ever cleaned those at my location alone. And whenever I babysat another store. Also, the coffee urns. Black bottoms and grinds caked on inside. If you live near go to Racetrack or Sheets. Cleanest urns and spouts I've ever known. I worked at a buffet about 8 years ago and my kitchen manager used to drop food back into the fryer after dropping it as well. I was disgusted by this on my first day. The next day I found out that our soup was only made once a week. I called the health inspector and took a few pictures before abruptly telling the few customers what they were eating and subsequently quitting my job. Okay, so my dad was a health and hygiene officer in the Air Force back in the early 50s and was stationed in England. His job included inspecting kitchen and latrine facilities at bases, overseeing quarantine on troops returning home from Europe, and doing health inspections on said troops. He and some fellow H&H officers were on leave in London and decided to have lunch at a pub that was advertising a soup and sandwich deal. They sit down to piping hot bowls of tomato soup and are talking and eating. When one of the guys says good soup, nice and meaty, everyone stops talking as it sinks in that tomato soup should not have meat in it, and my dad reluctantly digs his spoon to the bottom of his bowl and comes up with several well-cooked cockroaches. Being trained in such things, they stormed into the kitchen and confirmed that the place had their soup heating on a back burner uncovered and directly below a cold water pipe. The rising steam condenses on the pipe, makes it slippery and causes whatever scurry across it to fall into the soup. They yelled at the owner and reported the place, but beyond that they couldn't do much about the unexpected protein. Nice and meaty, I think I just died a little inside. This thread is pretty gross, but you can put your mind at ease by going to your county health department's website and they should have a list of recent inspection reports for your favorite restaurants. Happy eating. Worked at McDonald's. The McCafe machines were the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life. So much mold and slime and disgust. The first time I cleaned the machine, I never ordered a McCafe drink again. Just another day at McDonald's. I worked at McDonald's as well. We cleaned the McCafe machines every night. The juice machine on the other hand. Not an inspector, but my town has the inspection reports posted on a regular basis. I'm not sure how this place wasn't shut down. Non-critical violation. Observation. Observed holes in floor wall junction. Access point for mice rats. At service counter. Under grill. And above back door. Floor tiles cracked at back. Near 3 vat sink. Ceiling tile falling in bathroom. Sagging under debris and rodent poop. Non-critical violation. Observation. Harborage conditions exist. My town has the inspection reports posted on a regular basis. That should be the case everywhere. Former inspector and oh goodness I could write a book. 1. Burger King had raw sewage coming out of the drain ankle high. Employees acted like it was normal. 2. Taco Bell had a fly problem. Customer brought back a taco with a live fly inside. 3. Mold in ice machines. Seen some with gobs and gobs of pink mold oozing in the ice off from the ice plates. 4. Popeye's chicken serving rotten grey chicken. Stank like death. 5. Chick-fil-A raw sewage back up in kitchen with the owner wiping sweat off his face and continue making sandwiches. 6. Popeye's chicken where the whole building was slanted and about to fall over and still operating. 7. Popeye's chicken who knew who I was and spit in my food. 8. Lots of broken coolers and temperature abused foods. 9. Taco Bell with no AC in summer. No coolers worked and employees were sweating into food. Upper management kept delaying AC repairs. AC was fixed 3 days after inspection. 10. Watched a GM pull a spatula out of dirty sink water to flip burger patties. Scratches her butt while handling the burger. Be very wary of foreigners buying restaurants. They are the worst. Not a health inspector, but one of the Starbucks in my city had roaches. They closed, fumigated, and reopened. Still roaches. So, they do it again, and use more bombs. Still roaches. At a complete loss, they leave traps everywhere to try to control the problem. One day, one of the baristas disassembled an espresso bar to deep clean it. Roaches everywhere. That's right, one of the bars they use every day had roaches in it for weeks. And they were pulling espresso on it. People were drinking it. That was fricked up. That's where the Starbucks flavor is. It's why it tastes like burned butt. Now we know what butt it tastes of. I'm not a health inspector, but I recently spent the fall of 2017 renovating restaurants for a TV show. Most every place had unlabeled and spoiled food in places. One kitchen had a dead rat in the toaster oven. And one kitchen had no doors for their half-working refrigerators, so they covered them in fiberglass insulation. Yes, like the stuff in your walls. Not a health inspector but worked at a food place. I picked up a case of wings to be dropped in the grease, but when I took the lid off they smelled bad, and then when I saw the blood at the bottom was a dark brown instead of a bright red, I instantly started heading to the back to throw them out. My manager caught me on my way back there and said nothing was wrong with the wings. He sprayed water on them and put them in the grease. It was truly disgusting. Not an inspector, but I worked in the dish pit of a pub. Directly above my workstation was a vent with a big plastic grating. Or, at least, I assumed it was plastic. You couldn't really see it for the green moldy crud that coated the whole thing. That was my walking away point. I promised myself, if they ever asked me to clean that, I needed the job less than I needed to not do that. I used to work in food service distribution as a director of operations. A few times a year, I would ride with salespeople, meet with customers, make sure their service was good, all that. I was riding with our top sales guy and we had visited some of our most important accounts. Then we stopped at this little diner that he sold because it was basically right between a few big customers and it was easy to service. When we got there, the owner was in the process of adding onto his kitchen. All of the coolers and freezers were outside on his back deck, covered in pine needles and dust. He stopped hammering nails for a few minutes to chat with us. Then a waitress came out and told him she needed a lobster roll and fries. He went into the kitchen, took off his giant muck boots and set them on the end of the counter. His small dog ran around his ankles and eventually hopped on the counter. The owner did not wash his hands, made the lobster roll, fed some meat to the dog. The dog licked his fingers. He then went back to plating the meal, hit the bell, order up and went back to working on his addition. I actually gagged and almost puked in my mouth. Also, most of the Chinese restaurants I visited were horrific. Chinese trade was tough to break into. They were getting most of their stuff from NY or MA on spray painted, dirty box trucks with no refrigeration. The trucks would arrive with several guys riding in the back and 3 in the cab. They'd unload all of the stuff and it was probably kept at about 50-60 degrees all the way to ME from NY. In the kitchen, there would be buckets of raw chicken with flies buzzing around. Employees would drop stuff on the floor, pick it up and throw it back in, stuff like that. It was gross as heck. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.